All right, so Job, book of Job. And last week we talked about the prologue. I wanted to pump some moral intuitions so that when we go into the book of Job, we don't automatically just think that Job's friends are shallow. We don't automatically think that the problem of Job is just easy to solve. So the example that I gave a couple examples, but I'm going to reintroduce this example. Say a trafficker comes up to me and points out how amazing Wes and Julie, my kids, are, right? And then the trafficker tells me, well, your kids are only good because you shelter them too much. And let me take them, and then you'll see that they aren't as great as you thought, you know? And I'm like, yeah, sure, do what you want, just don't kill them. And if I did that as a parent, I mean, would I get medals for being a good parent? No. I mean, I would be like the dregs of society evil. Like that's what you would think of me, right? I would be very bad.
People with common sense would think that. You might get awards depending on who you ask.
That's true. That's true. In certain circles, yeah. But generally, anybody with a decent moral compass would say, Matt, you're a horrible human being. You should die. You should go to hell for the rest of eternity, kind of scenario, right? For letting my kids. There's a certain amount of acceptable risk we can give for a kid, but we can't do that and still be good. So then I'm asked the question when we look at Job, and it says, the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and turns away from evil. He still holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without a reason. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin. All that a man has, he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. And then the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life. Is this not a somewhat parallel kind of story? Certainly on the face of it, right? Why would we not make that same inference about God?
Because he has a different relationship. Like he can say, I mean, we don't hold people's, like I can't just say, yeah, you can take Ty out or you can take Darkela out. Where God has that jurisdiction over life and death. Like we don't have that as humans. So I don't know if that's a perfect analogy.
So, right, but if we think of it in terms of, and just for you guys, the story that we're going over is, if a trafficker came up to me and said, hey, and I was like, look how awesome my kids are, and the trafficker's like, yeah, your kids are only good because you protect them. Let me take them, and I'll show you that they really don't love you. They're not really good kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead and do that. What would you think of me as a parent? Obviously, horrible. So then the question is why don't we infer something similar about God, right? Because the situation seems, at least on the face of it, parallel. Okay, so I'm saying this because the ultimate point, I think, of Job, my opinion, is that the moral principles that we hold and use to judge other humans cannot be the same that we use when we're talking about God. The problem, though, then of that is we have to be completely agnostic about God. This is the tension that I'm trying to go through. And now we want to look at Job, the book of Job, the actual book of Job, and kind of walk through some of that tension with them and see why they see it as a tension. So first, again, we talk about the big scope of Job here. Here's the structure of it. You know, it's got a narrative beginning, prose beginning, and narrative end, and then it's all dialogues in the middle. The dialogues in the middle basically tell us what the characters in there are thinking about the events that took place in the prologue in the very beginning, right? There's 3 rounds of dialogues. We're only going to do one as a sample just because it's a long book, and for us to go through the entirety of the book, we just don't have enough time to do that. We don't have time to go through verse by verse today, obviously. So what I'm going to do is kind of select some passages in here, just as sort of representative samples of what these people are saying. Okay, so in the dialogues, they're obviously having a discussion about what happened. Well, what happened? A real brief backstory. Job goes from a place of the highest blessing to the lowest blessing. And not even just blessing. Job goes from a place of highest blessing. He has all this stuff. He's blessed in every way. He's protected by God. And then he goes to a place of cursedness. In the Old Testament, this is how they would have thought it. You're either blessed or you're cursed. Right? You might be in the middle, but like these are the sort of far ends, blessing and cursing. And in the heavenly realm, we have insight into what's going on there. God tells Satan Job's righteous. Satan's like, nah, he isn't really. If you take everything away, he'll curse you to your face. God's like, yeah, you think so? Do what you want and we'll see. All right? Goes through a second round of that. And it's like, yeah, well, you didn't let me hurt his body. If you let me hurt his body, then he'll curse you to your face. Right? It then ends with Job's wife going to Job and saying, are you still holding to your integrity? Curse God and die. And Job's response is, you're talking like one of the godless women would do. Should we receive what is good from God and not also receive what is evil? And here, I want to say, we give Job's wife a hard time for saying, you still holding on to your integrity, curse God and die. We're like, oh my gosh, she's horrible. I mean, there's even comedians who joke about it like, God left her alive to continue to torment him and that sort of thing, right? But if you think about what just happened to Job, you should have some understanding as to why she might have said what she said. Job, are you still holding to your integrity? What does that mean? Because this is going to be a common repeating theme throughout the book of Job. Job holds firm to his integrity. His interlocutors, the people he's having a conversation with, Job, why do you still hold on to your integrity? What does that mean in this context? And this one I'm going to throw out to you guys. Do you guys have any thoughts, or have you thought about this at all? Like what?
I guess it could be, we all have these conceptions of what God is and his moral attributes, and we think that we can really know them, like purely. But if God is kind of acting in a way that doesn't correspond to those conceptions that we have of him, then it'd be really hard to like hold on to that. Like I'd be like, I don't know if I can believe this conception of him anymore. He's like torturing me. So a little bit of that I think is going on potentially.
Sure. And well, specifically, like when you talk about the integrity of Job, and when his wife is like, you're holding to your integrity, and later on we'll see Job says, I will not give up my integrity, right? Do we have any idea what he means by that, by himself not giving up his integrity? Or when his wife says, you still hold fast to your integrity? Any thoughts on what that might mean?
My own moral beliefs,
Sorry?
my own moral beliefs about God, or
Okay.
his own personhood of trusting and walking in faith. He's not going to give that up.
Okay.
That's a yes.
Yeah, no, great. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I guess in kind of like two angles. It could mean like his own integrity, or he's holding on to his integrity, like his way of living that is integral. He's going to keep doing the same thing he's been doing. Or it could also be like he's holding on to his integrity, like he claims he was innocent and the suffering came despite his innocence, and the whole time he says, this isn't the consequences of my actions. This appears to be just some kind of like random
Right.
thing that has nothing to do with anything bad.
I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Still say that.
Proclaiming his innocence.
Exactly.
Didn't do it. Sorry, but y'all. I don't care what y'all think. I know. God knows I didn't do it.
Exactly. Yep. And that's the repeating theme. And this is the thing that makes Job's friends so upset, is that he keeps insisting on his integrity. I didn't do something. And what he says is, hey, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Shall we not receive good from him, but also receive evil from God? Okay, yeah.
I was just say, wasn't the test like Satan was trying to tempt him to curse God?
Yeah.
And so by holding on to integrity, he stays righteous. He doesn't curse God.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't become unrighteous, because he's saying like his wife is to be godless.
Yeah.
So you are unrighteous. I wonder if it's like by maintaining I'm going to do what's right even in a hard situation, like, and not curse God, not blame God for it.
Yes. So when he's talking about I hold fast to my integrity, It is this, I haven't done anything wrong. The passing of the test is, as the text actually says, the passing of the test is that he did not curse God, or he did not say anything, just charge God with wrongdoing. That was him passing the test. So even though we might understand, when this test is posed, we see that his wife fails the test and he passes the test. Now we might, again, we don't want to think of his wife as just completely this horrible human being. They had all of this blessing from God, and in that time you would think, like, if we're blessed from God, we must be doing the things that God wants. I don't know of anything that we've done wrong, and yet this God who we thought was going to love us and take care of us and support us has brought this about on us. And I say brought this about on us intentionally, not let's let this happen to us, but has brought this upon us. And in that time, one of the points of believing in a God was for protection, was so that God would bless you, so that you would be on the good side of that God, so that God would help you to be blessed, to be rich, to be have a good life, that sort of thing. So when she sees that this God isn't doing that, she's like, well, this isn't the right God. Curse God and die, right? But Job's like, no, he is the right God. Again, I'm interpreting here, right? I'm not just going off the text, but I'm worshiping the right God. But shall we not receive blessing and curses from him? Right? Which is kind of a weird thing to say. Would any of you say something like that? Well, we should receive curses from God. Probably not, right? We always think curses come from Satan, or curses come from other evil people, right?
Well, God never promised that we wouldn't have trouble. He promised he'd be with us.
Yeah, yeah. But in this case, if we know from the introduction that God allows Satan to go and do whatever he wants to Job for no reason. And in fact, if we hadn't had the prologue, like if we didn't have that story to begin with, we'd be like, well, I'm sure God has a good reason for that. What's interesting about the prologue is it makes it worse, because we know what happened and God just allowed it. And he said, Job even tells Satan, or not Job, God even tells Satan, you've incited me against him for no reason. And I allowed it. Why in the world would we think that's a good God? Why? So that kind of ends the prologue, and at the end of that we have his friends come along, and they come from a distance, and they come to mourn with Job. And again, I love this, the story sets this up, that they sat with him 7 days and nights and said nothing out of respect for Job's suffering. So again, we don't want to just take Job's interlocutors, his friends, as just these horrible people who just came to pick on Job. Right? These people sat with, how many of you would go and sit with a friend for 7 days and nights just out of respect for their suffering? Probably nobody. You might be like, hey, let's sit for an hour or two, and then, all right, now we gotta have some real talk. We gotta have some real conversation now. No, they sat with them 7 days. Now, granted, I don't know what their life was like. I don't know if they had a lot of time on their hands, but like, still, that's like a lot of empathy. They said they met together to come to show sympathy for him and to console him. But when they gazed intently from a distance but did not recognize him, they began to weep loudly. Each of them tore his robes, and they threw dust in the air over their heads to show their lament about what happened to Job. I don't think his friends were just superficial in their care for Job. Right? Then, after 7 days of waiting, Job opens his mouth. And he says, let the day on which I was born perish, and the night that said a man has been conceived. Why did I not die at birth, and why did I not expire as I came out of the womb? For the very thing I dreaded has happened to me, and what I feared has come upon me. I have no ease, I have no quietness, I cannot rest, turmoil has come upon me. So this is the beginning of the dialogues. We start with Job lamenting the day of his birth. Now, what kind of response do you think he deserves at the beginning? Like, what kind of, just off the cuff, like what kind of response did you think he? Yeah, sympathy. Okay.
Joe, don't feel that way.
Job, don't, yeah.
Don't feel that way. It's not that.
Okay.
We don't want you to die. You're here for a reason, all the comforting words that friends give.
Yeah. So his friends are a little irritated with him. Joe, look, I get it. You guys suffered like hugely. We cannot deny the massive losses that you've just incurred. We get that. But cursed be the day of your birth. Woe to the day of your birth. May light never shine upon it. Like a few days ago, like you were like living the life, man. You had all the cattle, the oxen, sons and daughters. People would come to you and they respected you, right? Now what's going on? So Eliphaz starts off, if someone should attempt a word with you, will you be impatient? But who can refrain from speaking? This is about as kind of sympathetic as they get, really. But look, you've instructed many and have strengthened feeble hands. Your words have supported those who stumbled, and you have given strength. You have strengthened the knees that gave way. But now the same thing comes to you, and you are discouraged. It strikes you, and you are terrified. Now, Eliphaz is saying, like, look, he's pointing out that Job is a hypocrite, right? In fact, later on in the dialogues towards the end, Job talks about all the things that he does for other people. He's like, look, I strengthen feeble hands. I help the blind. I help those who are being harmed by other people. I go and rescue them from that. I do all of those things. So they know him as a man who goes and comforts those who have fallen on hard times. And now, when it comes to him, they're like, you're a hypocrite. For evil does not come up from the dust, nor does trouble spring up from the ground, but people are born into trouble, as surely as the sparks fly upward. But as for me, I would seek God, and to God I would set forth my case. Therefore, blessed is the man whom God corrects. So do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. For he wounds, but he also bandages. He strikes, but his hands also heal. So what is Eliphaz doing here? How would you summarize like what he's trying to say to Job?
He's a Calvinist.
He's a Calvinist.
But it seems like he's saying that it's kind of just. Like it seems like we're all sinners, we're born sinners, and so like evil just doesn't come upon you. It's not upon you for no reason.
Right.
There is a reason, and you should just be okay with that knowing the reason.
Yeah, or just because it's kind of for evil does not come up from the dust, nor does trouble spring up from the ground. But people are people, broadly speaking. So if you were suffering, be like, look, the world is full of hardship. The world is full of difficulties, right? Like, it's okay, things happen, they're bad, and maybe you did something wrong, but God loves you, and God still can bring you back. If he's correcting you, he's doing that for a reason. He wants to bring you back, right? This is essentially what Eliphaz is trying to be helpful. It's not a mere condemnation. What undergirds Eliphaz his criticism of Job? At this point, has he asked Job about maybe any sins that he might have committed? No. So it seems like he's assuming that Job did something wrong. Why would he assume that?
Because usually God rewards the righteous and he punishes wicked.
Yes. So it's exactly right. Because if you didn't do anything wrong, and the divine orchestrator of all things has put you in this position, what does that mean about God's justice? Because justice is giving rewards to the righteous and punishment to the wicked. That's just what justice is. So if God allows this to happen to an innocent man, God is unjust. Right? And how can we argue with them? If we don't, the prologue, I don't know if the prologue really helps us. I mean, if anything, the prologue makes the problem more poignant. But even if we didn't have the prologue and we were Job's friends and we walked up and we said we saw all this that happened to him, because you might have like a little calamity or something like that and be like, okay, maybe that's just, the Lord's teaching him a little lesson here or something like that. But when there's a great calamity that comes upon someone, especially in these patriarchal times, it was because you did something wrong, right?
So Eliphaz didn't have Genesis, I guess, because you would think Adam and Eve sin, God gives them grace. Abel gives this, this bountiful offering, and he gets murdered. So I guess in hindsight, if you don't have Genesis, and you can't look back and be like, well, I mean, that wasn't really fair, or from our standards, but.
Yeah, so that's something I want to point out later too, is Job's friends are demanding that in order for God to be just, he has to bless the righteous and he has to punish the wicked, right? There's a lot of verses that say that. They may have an incomplete understanding of God. This is wisdom literature. So this is a battle of wisdom for Job and his friends. And you see this constantly reoccurring throughout the dialogues. And Job saying, I'm not inferior to you. I know all the things that you're talking about. You aren't wiser than me. Elihu at the end comes along and is like, I'm wiser than you. Everybody's got like this wisdom contest going on, right? But initially in these dialogues, his friends seem to have some kind of compassion for what's happening. It also scares them. Why do you think that might scare them to see Job in this situation?
Because if it can happen to him, it can happen to me.
Yeah, right,
He was all of this.
exactly. Oh, that my grief could be weighed and my misfortune laid on the scales too. But because it is heavier than the sand of the sea, that is why my words have been wild. Before we get to the next part, this I think is key to understand. Job is saying look, you guys are coming at me with these abstract principles of justice. But you haven't even considered what actually happened in my life. Which of you can point to something that I actually did wrong? You're not looking at that. You're looking just at the fact that, well, in order for God to be just, the outcome has to be good. Or if the outcome's bad, it must be because God doesn't love you or God's punishing you. Job's like, if my grief could be weighed, if you could see the grief that I have, if you could see what's going on. And obviously the things that happened to him, all the bad things, the death, the taking away of all of his possessions were bad. But the key point in here isn't even that for Job. It's that, but even more so than that is the arrows of the Almighty are within me. My spirit drinks their poison. God's sudden terrors are arrayed against me. The key torment is that he's like, God is against me. All of these other things are just signs of that. How do I fight against the Almighty? If God says that I'm worthy of punishment, but then doesn't tell me, how can I correct that in order to come in line with His will and then be blessed again? I don't know. Because as far as I know, I've been doing everything I'm supposed to do. First, Job talks to his friends, and what Job does that's different than his friends is he talks to his friends, but then he also then talks to God. He says to his friends, teach me, and I for my part will be silent. Explain to me how I've been mistaken. So he's asking for specifics. Don't just come to me with this notion that like God's just and like I have to have been wrong because of that. Like tell me what I did wrong. That would be what a friend would do. Come and tell me what I did wrong so I can fix it and get out of this predicament. Then he looks to God. Will you never look away from me? Will you not let me alone long enough to swallow my spit? If I have sinned, what have I done to you, O watcher of men? Why have you set me as your target? Have I become a burden to you? He speaks to God. There's something I don't think that we take seriously enough today is the sovereignty of God and the providence of God, the sovereign orchestration of the events of the human events that God takes care of. For Job, if something bad happens to you, even if it's through a secondary agent like the Satan, it's still God. Ultimately, the buck stops with God. If God either caused this or allowed it, it's because God caused it or allowed it. So if I'm in this situation, even if he uses the Sabians, or even if he uses the so-and-so Satan or whoever to make this situation happen for me, it's God who did it. What we tend to do is we're like, well, we look at the secondary cause, the person who brought it about, or maybe demons or something like that. We're like, well, God had nothing to do with it. We know from the prologue that Satan wouldn't have been able to do anything to Job unless God had allowed it, right? So Job is right. This isn't just Satan. I mean, Satan's like the instrument. God is the cause. Yeah.
Yeah, but, okay.
I love it when
I don't. Yes, God is sovereign over everything, but he just says, you do what you will, but protect his life. But he also doesn't tell Satan, okay, do this and this and this and this to him. Like, there's some respect for Satan's free will and like humans' free will. Like,
Sure.
God punishes evil, and God will ultimately punish Satan for what they're doing, for what he did too. And even when he reprimands the Israelites because they were wrong, he uses like other nations to do it who freely choose to attack. Then he gets on those nations. So it's like, there seems like, yeah, God allows it, but there's a difference between him like actively causing it, saying, yeah, Satan, do the worst thing you can do to it. But he doesn't say that. He's like, here's the boundaries. But Satan is the one who's choosing to be that evil and to do that.
That's true. Yeah. The question though is God in any way responsible for this? He could have said, no, you can't do this to Job. But he didn't.
Yeah, but it's still like, it's an allowing, but it's different. It's like,
Well, let me ask you this. In the case of the trafficker, right? Where the trafficker comes to, what?
I hate that.
I know, but that's why I use it. Because seriously, it's a horrible, horrible situation. Like if a trafficker comes to me and says, hey, your kids are only good because you haven't let me take them into the island and do all sorts of bad things. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead and do what you want to, just don't kill them. Do I bear some responsibility for that? When I could have said, no, don't take them to the island.
Yeah, but again, I don't think that's a perfect analogy.
It's not a perfect analogy.
It's a little weird because it's kind of what you're saying, like kind of like a forest fire happened, God didn't cause it, but he didn't like stop it. But it's weird because like Satan's like an actual moral agent that he gave the green light to punish Job. So it makes it like that much more difficult to wrestle with. Even if he wasn't actively causing the events that took place to him, he gave a moral agent freedom to cause things to Job, who's righteous.
Yeah, no, he did, and so that there's some responsibility in that way, but it's also, there's also a role of free will in there too. Like Satan is ultimately the one who chooses to do it. Like Satan didn't have to do any of it. Yes, God allowed it, but I think there's something there. It's not like
Yeah, sure.
God's like, okay, and kill his kids and do all this. Like there's still a respect of God at this time in the universe of respecting the free will of Satan, respecting the free will of us to do things that are not good, that were not part of his original creation and how he meant things to go. I'm just saying God may be allowing it to test Job, but it's not like he's out there, like, cause I think people can get a wrong view of God, like God is just like torturing people, sending all this. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, there's some.
I see what you're saying, and I certainly agree that there's some respecting of free will. But if we go back, the reason I use the trafficker example is because it's very clear, right? The moral stakes are very high, and it's very clear that if I allow my children to go to be with a trafficker just to teach them a lesson, I'm a bad parent. And I'm not just a bad parent, I'm a bad human being, like if I do that. So even though the trafficker as another agent is the one who's doing the actual harm, I still bear responsibility for being the person who's in charge of the children and allowing them to go with some trafficker and be horribly violated or abused. So the question then is, if that's the case with us, why don't we make that same inference about God? So if, like, say Job, you're like, well, Job at the end, he's like blessed, right? So it's all good, right? Well, no, that means Job did a good job and God gave him stuff after that. But how does that make God okay for doing the initial allowing of Satan to do all of these kinds of things? It would be, and if you want to say that there is a difference, you just have to delineate what that difference is.
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying. That's why I think the analogy isn't, it maybe gives us the wrong frame with which to look at God, because like you said, like, God is different than us. He's not the same as a human parent. And he has, again, authority over life and death that we don't have.
Mhm.
Like, it's not even up to us to say you can kill my kid or not, right, as a parent. But God can say I can take a life or give it, right? So there's got to be, I'm worried that that's giving a little bit of a misleading frame.
It totally is. It absolutely is.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like,
But there's a reason for that. The reason is that unless we specify what the moral difference is, now we're just leaving it to vague ambiguities. Well, how is God different from our morality? Like, what does it mean? Why can God allow all of this horrendous suffering to come on someone and we don't attribute him as a moral evil, or attribute him as being an evil God? Why don't we do that? With any human person that allowed their kids to be just given to traffickers, we would say you're a horrible, despicable human being. We would absolutely do that.
Mhm.
So then,
I can see the dilemma a little bit, because I guess if I were to say God's a different kind of thing, and because of his metaphysical nature, his moral attributes flow from his metaphysical nature of him being infinite. But even in that, if I say that as like to resolve this solution, then the issue is, oh, well then how can we know anything about God?
exactly.
And even if you use like analogous conversation, you still are in trouble there a little bit.
Right, because we can give a general account of God's goodness is analogous to ours, but it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to something like this, how do we judge that? When we come to a particular concrete example where God's like, yeah, Satan, go do whatever you want to my righteous servant Job, who's done nothing wrong or nothing to deserve this. By my own admission, he's not done anything wrong to deserve this. And yet I'm allowing you to do that. If we're going to say that he's the same, like we judge God in the same way we would judge any human being, we have to conclude that God's evil.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any way around that. If we're going to say it's completely different, then we're going to have to say that we just don't know what it means for God to be good. So I think you hit the nail on the head. So the point of the characterizing it this way is to give us a ground for starting to explore what does it actually mean. We don't want to be agnostic on the one hand about God's goodness, but we also don't want to say that it's exactly the same as human goodness, because if we do, God's done all sorts of evil things. And we don't want to say that, right?
well, he also has a different authority over life and death than we have. I'm just saying,
Does that authority mean that he can exercise it in ways that seem completely morally horrendous to us?
no, and that's the thing. I mean, he expresses his moral law through the Ten Commandments, and he says, I care for the widow and the orphan. He does reveal himself in ways that we are supposed to emulate. So there's got to be some touch point between what God has revealed of himself as good and what he tells us to do is good. That's what, like, Lewis is like, it can't be completely different, otherwise we have no way to know God is good.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. When you're answering the question, though, I think like the frame kind of, I see what you're doing, but I think it can be confusing because God is different and he has different authorities than we have, but he's not going to do something evil because his nature is goodness. His nature is love in itself too. So it's like he can't deny that.
Yeah, no one here is denying that, right? In fact, let's go to the next slide. Bildad. Does God pervert justice? Or does the Almighty pervert what is right? If your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. But if you will look to God and make your supplication to the Almighty, if you become pure and upright, even now, he will rouse himself for you and he will restore your righteous home. It goes on, for inquire now of the former generation and pay attention to the findings of our ancestors. For we were born yesterday and do not have knowledge, since our days on earth are but a shadow. Surely God has not rejected a blameless man, nor does he grasp the hand of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with gladness. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be no more. It's a kind of encouragement to Bildad. And he encourages them by saying God is just. God is loving. Everyone in the dialogue knows that God's just. Everyone in the dialogue knows that he's all powerful. Everyone in the dialogue knows that he's all good and that he's a good judge, just a good judge or a just judge of the universe and dealing with the affairs of the world. Everybody knows those things. Then why is there an argument? Why are they still arguing? Because Job holds to his integrity, and him holding to his integrity entails a kind of injustice on the part of God. And at the very end, well, I don't want to say at the very end, sorry, but that's the tension. And that's what brings up the continued debate between these guys. They know he's just. They know he's good. They know he's all powerful.
So I guess when he says he's holding his integrity, I guess that means like he knows he has no real reason to feel guilt because he knows that he hasn't done anything wrong. But the only reason he knows he hasn't done anything wrong is because he knows who God is and isn't doubting him despite this dilemma going on.
Yep.
And that, that's a much more powerful way of looking at it. That's cool.
Because now you have to live in this tension, and that's why I think James talks about Job as having the patience of Job. That's what it means to have the patience of Job, is to say, I hold these things as true in tension because I don't know how they can both be true. That's the patience of Job. I'm so tempted to go to the end, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, so Job's response, truly I know that this is so. It's like, you guys aren't telling me anything new. How can a human be just before God? If someone wishes to contend with him, he cannot answer him 1 time in 1,000. Again, he's affirmed. He knows God's just. If it's a matter of strength, most certainly he is the strong one. And if he's a matter of justice, he will say, who will summon me? Basically, who are you to summon me? As if I don't know how to rule my universe. Although I'm innocent, my mouth would condemn me. Although I am blameless, it would declare me perverse. I am blameless. I do not know myself. I despise my life. It is all one. That is why I say he destroys the blameless and the guilty. Contrary to what the friends are saying, Job's like, no, God destroys both the blameless and the guilty. For he is not a human being like I am, that I might answer him, that we might come together in judgment. Nor is there an arbiter between us who may lay his hand on us both, who would take his rod away from me, so that his terror would not make me afraid. Then I would speak and not fear him, but it is not so with me. Job's afraid of God. Proverbs says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. But look what that's led to with Job. He's terrified of God. Even if I could make my case before God, he would terrify me that I would stutter. I wouldn't know what to say. I would be in utter terror in standing before God. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Tell me why you are contending with me. Is it good for you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands while you smile on the schemes of the wicked? Are your days like the days of a mortal, your years like the years of a mortal, that you must search out my iniquity and inquire about my sin? This is rhetorical. Clearly he doesn't think he needs that. God, you know me. You know whether I've sinned or not. Although you know that I'm not guilty, and that there is no one who can deliver out of your hand. And your hands have shaped me and made me, but now you destroy me completely. Do you guys feel the weight of Job's dilemma? The weight of Job's, why would a good, just God do this to me? Because his notion of God's providence makes them much more difficult. It would be easier if Job was like, well, it was just Satan. God's like, he doesn't want this to happen, but Satan did it to me, right? That would be easier because he's like, God's still good. He divorces the causal relationship from God and just attributes all the malice and evil to Satan, and then you're good. God's just, but he doesn't do that. Job thinks God's doing this to him. He says this over and over and over again. It is God who is attacking me. God is doing this to me. If I'm guilty, woe to me, and if I'm innocent, I cannot lift my head. I'm full of shame and satiated with my affliction. So Job's predicament is, no matter what I do, whether I'm guilty or not, there's absolutely nothing I can do. If I lift myself up, you'll hunt me as a fierce lion. And again, you display your powers against me. You bring new witnesses against me and increase your anger against me. Relief troops come against me. Why then did you bring me out of the womb? I should have died, and no eye would have seen me. And Zophar comes in to comfort him. Should people remain silent at your idle talk, and should no one rebuke you when you mock? For you have said, my teaching is flawless, and I am pure in your sight. Can you discover the essence of God? Can you find out the perfection of the Almighty? It is higher than the heavens. What can you do? It is deeper than Sheol. What can you know? It measures longer than the earth and broader than the sea. This response to Job, what do you think of this response to Job? Is there good in it? Is there bad? Is it all bad? Is it like, is he saying things that are true or untrue? What do we think about this?
I think it's very common to our response when someone's suffering that we'll kind of say, oh, well, good could come of it. You just don't understand yet. Or God has the bigger picture.
Yep.
Which is true. God
Mhm.
does have the bigger picture.
Sure.
Good
Yeah.
come out of it. And so I think it is partially right, but it's also sometimes it is not an answer. It's just,
Tone deaf.
yeah.
Tone deaf? Okay.
And if you applied it, you would still be kind of like agnostic about God. But there's some truth in the fact that he's saying we can't completely know the essence of God, not completely.
Uh-huh.
But his response, if you applied it, you would still feel kind of agnostic. Like, can I know anything?
Okay.
I would want to hear that if I was struggling.
You what?
I would want to hear that answer if I was struggling at all.
Do you know who sounds similar when they answer Job? God.
The answer
When God kindly comes up and gives his speech, there's things almost directly out of his friend's comments that God says to Job. What do we think of that? Like, how do we?
Come to me for advice.
Sorry?
God goes, you come to me for advice? Where were you to give me advice? Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, now I think there are differences between what they're saying and what God's saying, right? It's not like there's no differences, but it sure sounds a lot like the things that his friends are saying. And it's true that God's, let me see what time it is real quick. Okay, a little bit. It's true that God's above what we can know. It's true. Like you said, he knows way more than we do, right? But does that solve the problem? His knowing more? Job's questioning his goodness, his justice. To point out that God is all powerful or to point out that God's unknowable doesn't answer the question, right? It furthers the question. If iniquity is in your hand, put it far away, and do not let evil reside in your tents. For then you will lift up your face and without blemish. You will be securely established and will not fear. You will be secure because there is hope, and you will be protected, and you will take rest in safety. You will lie down, and no one to make you afraid. And many will seek your favor, like they did before. But the eyes of the wicked will fail, and escape eludes them. Their one hope is to breathe their last. Who just said that they wanted to breathe their last? Job, right. And now Zophar is saying the wicked are the people who say that stuff. Right? But before we do that, so what might animate this, we already talked about, is that their notion of the justice of God. But it's not just that, like, if we look in the Proverbs, we see a lot of stuff like what Job's friends are saying. The wicked person earns deceitful wages, but the one who sows righteousness reaps a genuine reward. True righteousness leads to life, but the one who pursues evil, it to his. Why can I not read things? But the one who pursues evil pursues it to his own death. The one who sows iniquity will reap trouble. The rod of his fury will end. A generous person will be blessed, for he has given some of his food to the poor. The backslider will be paid back for his own ways, but a good person will be rewarded for this. A wise person is cautious and turns from evil, but a fool throws off restraint as an overconfident. And his friends clearly see him as a fool for throwing off restraint. Job says many times, I will complain in the bitterness, I will give full vent to the bitterness of my soul for what has happened. This is clearly an unrestrained sort of venting to God. So they're going to see Job as unwise, someone who is unrestrained and overconfident. in demanding his integrity. Deuteronomy, if you indeed obey the Lord your God and are careful to observe all his commands I am giving you today, the Lord your God will elevate you above all the nations of the earth. All these blessings will come to you in abundance if you obey the Lord your God. You will be blessed in the city and blessed in the field. Your children will be blessed, as well as the produce of your soil, the offspring of your livestock, the calves of your herds, the lambs of your flocks. Sound familiar? That's the very thing that Job talks about in the prologue to establish that Job is blessed. His livestock, his family, all of that. If you do not obey, Deuteronomy 28:15-18, but if you ignore the Lord your God and are not careful to keep all his commands and statutes I'm giving you today, then all of these curses will be upon you in full force. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the field. Your basket and your mixing bowl will be cursed. Your children will be cursed, as well as the produce of your soil, the calves of your herds, the lambs of your flocks. What animates them? Why wouldn't they be animated that way? Why wouldn't they think Job has done something bad, right? I love some of Job's responses. They're so witty and so awesome. He goes, without a doubt, you are the people and wisdom will die with you. I also have an understanding as well as you. I'm not inferior to you. Who does not know such things as these? All the verses we just cited, Job's not unfamiliar with that. He's not unfamiliar with that mindset. For calamity there is derision according to the ideas of the fortunate, a fate for those whose feet slip. But the tenants of robbers are peaceful, and those who are the tents of robbers are peaceful, and those who provoke God are confident, who carry their God in their hands, basically idols. But I wish to speak with the Almighty, and I desire to argue my case with God. But you, however, are inventors of lies. All of you are worthless physicians. If you would keep completely silent, for you that would be wisdom.
No.
That's such a mic drop, man. I love that. Listen now to my argument and be attentive to my lips' contentions. Will you speak wickedly on God's behalf? Will you speak deceitfully for him? Your maxims are proverbs of ashes, and your defenses are defenses of clay. But wait, Job, I'm just citing Proverbs. I'm citing Deuteronomy, right? I'm not saying they were actually citing them. But these are clearly principles about which they had in that time about God. We're not citing anything that's new. These should just be obvious to all of us. Job's like, they are. But that's the problem. The problem is that those things are obvious to us. I should be blessed, not cursed. Even if he slays me, I will hope in him. I will surely defend my ways to his face. Moreover, this will come to my deliverance. This is these are key passages here that introduce new ideas that are key to understanding why Job is seen as saying things that are correct about God, while his friends are not. Even if he slays me, I will hope in him. I will surely defend my ways to his face. Moreover, this will become my deliverance. He has a hope that when he stands before God and offers his defense, that God will deliver a just verdict. This will become my deliverance, for no godless person would come before him. Listen carefully to my words. Let your ears be attentive to my explanations. See now, I have prepared my case. I know that I am right. Who will contend with me? If anyone can, I will be silent and die. Other scriptures testify to the fact that, the friends are taking as a universal principle, unjustifiably, that the righteous will always be blessed and the unrighteous or the wicked will always be cursed or be brought down. Psalm 73, certainly God is good to Israel and to those whose motives are pure. But as for me, my feet almost slid out from under me, for I envied those who are proud, as I observed the prosperity of the wicked. For they suffer no pain. Their bodies are strong and well fed. They are immune to trouble common to men. They do not suffer as other men do. Arrogance is their necklace, and violence covers them like clothing. Their prosperity causes them to do wrong. Their thoughts are sinful. They mock and say evil things. They proudly threaten violence They speak as if they rule in heaven and lay claim to the earth. Therefore, they have more than enough food to eat and even suck up the water of the sea. They have plenty. The wicked have plenty. Ecclesiastes, here's another enigma that occurs in the earth. Sometimes there are righteous people who get what the wicked deserve, and sometimes there are wicked people who get what the righteous deserve, I said. This is also an enigma. It's true, but sometimes we don't see it as an enigma. We're just like, well, yeah, this is how the world is, you know. What's the enigma? That's an enigma in a theistic world, in a world where God sovereignly rules, in a world that God is good. That's why it's an enigma. If the world is just matter in motion, what's the enigma? Yeah, just whether you're good or bad, you get good, bad, it's just the way of the world. But when there's a good God who sovereignly orchestrates things, it's an enigma. Everyone shares the same fate, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the ceremonial clean and unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. What happens to the good person also happens to the sinner. What happens to those who make vows also happens to those who are afraid to make vows. This is the unfortunate fact about everything that happens in the earth. The same fate awaits everyone. In addition to this, the hearts of all people are full of evil, and there is folly in the hearts during their lives. Then they die. Do I have?
That's my life verse right there. That's so depressing.
Someone needs to make birthday cards from these passages. Okay, so I got to finish up because we're out of time. As surely as God lives, he has denied me justice, the Almighty who has made my life bitter. For while my spirit is still in me and my breath from God is in my nostrils, my lips will not speak wickedness and my tongue will whisper no deceit. I will never declare that you three are in the right. Until I die, I will not set aside my integrity. I will maintain my righteousness and never let it go. My conscience will not reproach me for as long as I live. You would think, in today's context, you would think if anybody said that, they're like, you are like hellbound, dude, like your own righteousness and maintaining your own integrity. You would not think God would affirm what he has to say. Let's see, one more. Although I am innocent, I could not answer him. I could only plead with my judge for mercy. If I summoned him and he answered me, I would not believe that he would be listening to my voice. He would crush me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds for no reason. He does not allow me to recover my breath, for he fills me with bitterness. If it is a matter of strength, most certainly he is the strong one, and if it is a matter of justice, he will say, who will summon me? Although I am innocent, my mouth would condemn me. Although I am blameless, it would declare me perverse. This is going to be very key when God shows up. And we'll talk about that next time. And I'll reiterate some of these passages and why they're important. We'll talk about Elihu, who kind of is the last final human wisdom on this matter. And then we'll go into God's speeches and then the end next time. And I'm just going to warn you, the answers aren't like super clear, crystal clear, and easy to like, oh yeah, done. Now I'll never have to think about this anymore. And in fact, part of the reason for that, in wisdom literature, the whole point is to bring something up so that you'll continue to think about it, right? Continue to think about it. It poses a problem, and it gives you gestures at possible solutions. But it's the point of wisdom literature is for you to now take that and go think about it and try to think through it more thoroughly. Anyway, that's the end of this section. We'll go more into the rest of it later. Now, let's real quick prayer. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for this time. I just pray that you would help us to seek to understand your word, even if it's difficult, especially when it's difficult, and help us to strive hard after you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks.
Good.
Thanks.
Building the tension.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all have to come back next week. Hear
Yeah.
the answer.
Yes. That makes you maybe
The
smarter
answer.
So that you'll like deal with it. There are answers.
Yeah.
They're just not easy.
Matt is not an atheist. Can't confirm.
Yeah, you're definitely steelmanning the argument or the dilemma, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I think,
More tough.
yeah. It should be tough.
Yeah.
It seems to me like that's what the literature is trying to
Yeah.
impose on us. Like, this is not easy. This is tough.
And
Yeah.
at some point you have to go, okay, I know you're good,
Yep.
even though my injustices still reign, that doesn't change your character.
Yeah.
And it's a faith thing, that at some point you have to just say, I don't understand it, okay, so you fix it, Lord, I'm out. Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thanks.